A giant hummingbird etched into the desert floor stretches wider than 3 football fields. This is the Nazca Lines, a puzzle carved into the earth that has baffled experts for generations. By the end of this journey, you will have the evidence to decide for yourself if this was the work of human hands reaching for the gods or something not of this world. We will uncover why a society that could not fly created art only visible from the sky and what secret rituals might have walked these paths. What does a civilization say when it draws messages meant for the heavens? This stark and windswept plateau is one of the driest places on Earth. The Nazca Desert in southern Peru receives less than a single inch of rain each year, a profound and lasting dryness that has acted as a perfect preservative. For nearly 2,000 years, the climate here has remained almost unchanged, with no heavy rains to wash the designs away and minimal wind to scatter the surface stones. This environmental stability created a natural time capsule, locking the lines in a state of suspended animation. The canvas itself is immense, stretching across approximately 450 square kilometers of flat, stony plain. It is a landscape of subtle colors, dominated by rusty red surface rocks that contrast with the lighter, sand-colored soil beneath. To create their designs, the Nazca people needed only to remove these dark topstones, peeling them back to reveal the bright earth below. This simple act of displacement formed lines that stand in sharp contrast to their surroundings, a technique that produced markings durable enough to last for millennia. Think of the entire area as a single, sprawling art gallery laid out under the open sky, a gallery so vast you could fit a small city within its borders. This is the monumental stage upon which one of history's greatest mysteries was drawn. For centuries, these vast drawings remained a secret kept by the desert floor. Local people, of course, lived among the lines, their paths worn into the earth by generations of feet. They saw the markings as ancient roads or sacred pathways for ceremonial walks. But the true marvel of the Nazca Lines was a mystery hidden in plain sight, a secret that could only be unlocked by rising above the earth. The sheer scale of a hummingbird that spans the length of 3 jumbo jets is impossible to comprehend when you are standing beside its wing. You cannot see the forest when you are standing among the trees. The key to this puzzle finally arrived with the invention of the airplane. In the 1920s and 30s, commercial flights began crossing the Peruvian desert. Pilots were the first modern humans to see the lines for what they truly were. Looking down from their cockpits, they reported seeing strange, primitive landing strips carved into the plateau. One of the first scientific mentions came from the Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia's Zesp, who learned of the geoglyphs from local sources and documented them in 1927, though even he struggled to grasp their full form from the ground. But it was an American historian named Paul Cossack who truly opened the world's eyes. While in Peru studying ancient irrigation systems, he decided to charter a small plane to get an aerial view of the desert. What he saw from that window on one clear day in 1939 took his breath away. As the sun set, he watched in awe as one of the long, straight lines pointed directly toward the setting sun. He famously called the Nazca Pampa the biggest astronomy book in the world. From that moment, the world could no longer ignore the immense gallery of art etched into the Peruvian desert. The age of aviation had finally given humanity the perspective needed to see an ancient wonder, a wonder that immediately presented a new and profound question. How could a people who lived nearly 2,000 years ago create such precise, giant artwork for an audience that would not exist for centuries? From the air, this desert canvas reveals an entire menagerie of colossal figures and mysterious forms. The geoglyphs can be divided into 3 distinct categories, each more bewildering than the last. First are the straight lines, thousands of them, crisscrossing the desert with impossible precision. Some of these lines run perfectly straight for over 30 miles, cutting across the landscape as if drawn with a ruler on a cosmic scale. Then come the geometric shapes, massive trapezoids, rectangles, and triangles that look like immense runways or ceremonial plazas carved directly into the earth. The largest of these trapezoids is staggering, stretching to a width of nearly 2,000 feet, but the most captivating designs are the biomorphs, the famous animal and plant figures that have become the poster children for this ancient mystery. The hummingbird, with its long, delicate beak and sweeping wings, measures over 300 feet from tip to tail. The spider, with one leg extended in an anatomically perfect detail, spans 150 feet. There is a monkey depicted with a characteristically coiled tail, stretching nearly 400 feet in length. A majestic condor, its wings outstretched for flight, covers a distance of 450 feet. And perhaps the most enigmatic of all is the figure nicknamed the astronaut, a humanoid form standing on a hillside, seeming to wave with one hand, its large, round eyes staring out from the rock for centuries. Each of these figures is so vast that you could lay the Statue of Liberty down inside their outlines and still have room to spare. This is not just art, it is art on a scale that defies human comprehension, a gallery of giants meant to be seen by something or someone looking down from the sky. The hands that carved these desert giants belonged to the Nazca civilization, a people who flourished in these arid valleys for nearly 1,000 years. From around 100 years before the Common Era until 800 years into the Common Era, their culture thrived in an environment that seems brutally inhospitable to us today. Far from being a primitive society, the Nazca were masters of adaptation and artistry. Their legacy is not just etched into the desert floor, but is preserved in stunning polychrome pottery, ceramics painted with vibrant images of mythical beings, harvests, and daily life. They were also master weavers, creating textiles of such intricate beauty and complex symbolism that they rival the finest fabrics of the ancient world. But perhaps their most critical innovation was how they conquered the desert itself. They engineered an incredible system of subterranean aqueducts, known as puquios, to tap into underground water sources. These were not simple wells, but complex, spiraling tunnels and vertical shafts that brought life-giving water to the surface, allowing their agriculture to bloom in the dryness. This was a society of profound spiritual depth and remarkable technical skill, a culture that saw the world in both practical and sacred terms. They were clearly capable of grand, coordinated projects that required immense planning and communal effort. Their desert canvas was not a random doodle, but a purposeful, monumental undertaking. The question is not whether they had the ability to create the lines, but why they would pour so much effort into art they could never fully see. The true genius of the Nazca people lies not in complex machinery, but in their profound understanding of their own environment. To create these enduring masterpieces, they employed a beautifully simple process of subtraction. The desert floor is a natural mosaic of dark, sun-baked stones rich with iron oxide, which gives them their distinctive rusty red color. Just beneath this thin, dark pavement lies a substrate of much lighter, sand-colored soil. The creators needed only to remove the top stones, pushing them aside to expose the bright earth below. This created a stark, high-contrast line that could last for centuries, protected by one of the driest climates on Earth. The method was straightforward, but the scale at which they applied it is what defies belief. Imagine trying to sketch a perfect, 1-mile-wide monkey on the ground using only basic tools. How do they scale up a small model into a geoglyph visible from space? The answer likely involves a combination of simple mathematics and coordinated human effort. Archaeologists suggest they may have first created small-scale models on prepared plots of earth. Using a grid system of ropes and wooden stakes, they could have meticulously transferred the design, square by square, to its monumental final scale. A team of workers would then follow the plotted lines, carefully removing the dark stones and piling them along the edges to form a continuous berm. This was not a task for a handful of people, but a massive communal project requiring hundreds, perhaps thousands, of participants working in unison under a single, clear vision. The straight lines, some running for dozens of miles without deviating, demonstrate an almost supernatural mastery of surveying. They could have used a series of sighting posts, aligning them with distant landmarks on the horizon to maintain their dead-straight trajectory across the vast, uneven terrain. This was an engineering feat of staggering proportion, a testament to what human collaboration and a brilliant, simple idea can achieve. They transformed the entire desert into a collaborative canvas, proving that the most advanced technology they possessed was not made of metal, but of shared purpose and meticulous planning. Perhaps the most compelling explanation for the lines is written not in the stones, but in the very air the Nazca breathed. It is a theory rooted in survival. This was a civilization living on the edge, in a land where water was more precious than gold. Their entire existence depended on a delicate and often unforgiving balance. The mountains to the east were their lifeline, the source of the seasonal water that fed their underground aqueducts. In a world ruled by such powerful, invisible forces, it makes sense that their greatest art was a desperate, beautiful prayer. The water cult hypothesis suggests the Nazca Lines were not meant to be seen by us or by any earthly being. They were a form of sacred communication, a direct plea to the gods who controlled the rain. Picture a long, straight line stretching toward a distant mountain peak. A shaman or a group of priests would walk this path during a ceremony, a slow, deliberate procession across the desert. They were not just walking on the ground, they were tracing a connection between their people and the divine. The line itself was a conduit for their prayers, a spiritual channel aimed directly at the mountain deities they believed could release the life-giving water. The massive trapezoids could have served as ceremonial plazas, spaces where communities gathered to leave offerings or perform rituals, their collective energy focused on a single, vital goal. The animal figures are not random choices. In Nazca cosmology, many of these creatures were deeply symbolic. The hummingbird, a being of immense energy and vibrancy, could represent the hope for a fertile, blooming world. The spider was often connected with rain in Andean myths, a bringer of life-giving moisture. The monkey, an animal of the lush, eastern rainforests, was a living symbol of the water-rich lands they so desperately needed. This transforms the entire desert from an art gallery into a vast outdoor temple. Every line, every trapezoid, every animal was a permanent part of their liturgy, etched into the earth as an everlasting ritual. They were not creating images for an audience in the sky, but for the gods in the mountains and the heavens. The fact that the full glory of their work was invisible to them from the ground was the entire point. Their faith was so absolute that they built monuments they could not comprehend, trusting that the deities they worshipped could see their devotion from above. This theory grounds the mystery in a deeply human reality. It was not aliens or advanced technology, but a profound spiritual response to the most fundamental human need, the need for water. Yet, if these lines were sacred pathways for water rituals, why do so many of them lead to places with no water at all? Yet, for all its compelling logic, the water cult theory cannot fully explain the Nazca Lines. The desert holds another layer of meaning, one written in the stars above. This is the astronomical observatory theory, an idea that transformed our understanding of the lines from a spiritual plea into a scientific instrument on a colossal scale. The very same historian who first brought the lines to world attention, Paul Kossak, was also the first to propose this celestial connection. His work was later championed and refined by the German mathematician and archaeologist Maria Reich, who dedicated her entire life to their study. Their revolutionary idea was this: the Nazca Pampa was not just a temple, but a giant astronomical calendar. They believed the lines were a sophisticated map of the heavens, used to track the complex movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Imagine standing at the center of a straight line that stretches to the horizon. On the morning of the June solstice, you watch as the sun rises from a specific notch in the distant hills, perfectly aligned with the path you are standing on. This was not a coincidence, but a deliberate act of engineering. Reich and Kossak documented numerous such alignments. Certain lines point directly to the spot on the horizon where the sun rises or sets on the solstices, the longest and shortest days of the year. Others mark the equinoxes, when day and night are of equal length. This celestial knowledge was a matter of survival. For an agricultural society living in a desert, timing was everything. Knowing precisely when the seasonal rains were due, when to plant crops, and when to harvest was the difference between prosperity and famine. The lines provided an unerring, permanent clock etched into the landscape, a way to synchronize human activity with the cosmic cycle. The trapezoids, those massive, clean-sided shapes, could have functioned as platforms for rituals that coincided with these celestial events. A community might gather inside one of these giant forms to witness the sun setting in perfect alignment with its central axis, a powerful visual confirmation that the time for planting had arrived. This theory frames the Nazca not just as artists or priests, but as master astronomers. They were reading the sky and recording its rhythms on a scale so grand it could guide an entire civilization. They turned their entire world into a single, interconnected observatory where the earth and the heavens were in constant, measurable dialogue. But if the lines were a precise celestial calendar, why are so many of the alignments only approximate, and why do countless other lines seem to point to nothing in the sky at all? While astronomers looked to the heavens for meaning, another theory descended from the stars with a force that would captivate millions. The year 1968 introduced a radical new explanation that permanently changed the public's perception of the lines. Swiss author Erich von Däniken published his blockbuster book, Chariots of the Gods, and in its pages, he presented a stunningly simple answer to the mystery. He argued that the Nazca Lines were not ancient runways or celestial maps, but landing strips and navigation signals for extraterrestrial visitors. Von Däniken pointed to the sheer scale and precision of the geoglyphs as his primary evidence. How could a primitive culture, he asked, create such immense and perfectly straight lines without the aid of aerial surveying? He insisted that the animal figures, like the colossal spider and monkey, were not symbols for water gods, but were meant as markers, giant signposts that could only be recognized and appreciated from high above the ground. For a public already fascinated by the growing space race and the possibility of life on other planets, this idea was electrifying. It transformed the desert plateau from an archaeological site into a potential interstellar airport. The theory suggested that ancient humans, awestruck by advanced beings they perceived as gods, had labored under alien direction to create these vast drawings as a welcoming beacon for their return. Von Däniken's work became a global phenomenon, selling millions of copies and embedding the image of the Nazca Lines as proof of ancient astronauts deep into popular culture. It was a compelling, cinematic narrative that offered a clear and thrilling solution to a deeply puzzling question, but this captivating story raises its own difficult problems. If these were landing strips for advanced spacecraft, why are they made of loose, fragile soil that could never support the weight of a landing vessel? And why would beings with the technology for interstellar travel need simple line drawings on the ground to navigate? There is a profound difference between looking at a map and walking the land itself. Another theory suggests the Nazca Lines were never meant to be seen as a whole from above, but to be experienced step by step on the ground. This is the spiritual pathway theory, an interpretation that sees the desert not as a canvas, but as a labyrinth for the soul. Imagine a shaman, a spiritual specialist, beginning a slow, deliberate walk along one of the impossibly long, straight lines. With each step, the everyday world begins to fall away. The sheer monotony of the journey, the rhythmic placement of one foot in front of the other under the relentless sun, could induce a powerful trance state. This was not a casual stroll, it was a meticulously planned ritual of transcendence. The lines themselves were not just markings, they were conduits. By physically tracing these paths, the walker was believed to be traveling a sacred route, moving from the realm of the living toward the realm of the gods and ancestors. The giant trapezoids might have served as spiritual plazas, places where this energy was concentrated. A community might gather at the wide end of a trapezoid, watching as their shaman walked the narrowing path toward the small end, symbolically transitioning from the physical world into a thinner, more spiritual space. This practice is echoed in spiritual traditions across the globe, from the labyrinth walks of medieval cathedrals to the vision quests of indigenous cultures. The purpose was always the same: to alter ordinary consciousness and open a doorway to the divine. The animal figures take on a new meaning here, A shaman might walk the spiral tail of the monkey, not to see its shape, but to connect with the spirit of the monkey itself, to gain its agility or its connection to the forest. They might traverse the long beak of the hummingbird to absorb its incredible energy and speed. In this state of heightened awareness, the shaman could communicate with ancestor spirits, seek healing for the community, or plead directly with the deities who controlled the rain and the harvest. The entire desert becomes a massive, open-air temple designed for a single, powerful purpose: spiritual travel. The fact that the full image was invisible to the walker was irrelevant. The power was in the journey, not the destination. This theory weaves together the human need for the sacred with the very physical act of walking, turning a geological mystery into a deeply personal human experience. But if the lines were meant for walking, why create some so narrow that only one person could traverse them, and others so vast they could hold an entire village? That very question strikes at the heart of the mystery. If the Nazca people were firmly on the ground, why pour generations of effort into a gallery for the sky? The answer may lie not in the limitations of their bodies, but in the boundless nature of their beliefs. For a culture that saw the divine in every mountain peak and every star, the heavens were the natural home of the gods. Creating art intended for a celestial audience was the ultimate act of devotion. It was a way of saying, we see you, we honor you, and we are making our mark for you on a scale worthy of your attention. The immense size and precision were not a technical challenge to be overcome, but a spiritual necessity. A small, humble drawing would not suffice for a deity. Only a hummingbird as wide as a city block could capture the attention of a sky god. The invisibility of the complete work from the ground was not a flaw, it was the entire point. It required an immense leap of faith, a testament to their conviction that the gods were truly watching from above. This perspective transforms the desert from a canvas into a colossal billboard, its messages aimed squarely at the heavens. Yet another powerful idea suggests we have been asking the wrong question all along. We are obsessed with the final product, the completed image seen from an airplane. But what if, for the Nazca, the true power was not in the viewing, but in the very act of creation? The spiritual significance may have been embedded in the process itself. Envision the communal effort required, hundreds of people moving in unison, following the directions of priests or elders, each person carefully removing stones to trace a line they would never see in its entirety. This was not a tedious construction job, it was a participatory ritual. Every stone moved was a prayer offered, every foot of line cleared was a step toward divine favor. The coordinated labor would have forged a powerful sense of community and shared purpose, binding everyone together in a sacred project that transcended any single lifetime. The act of walking the lines during ceremonies, of physically engaging with these sacred pathways, may have been the primary spiritual experience. The final, magnificent image was almost a byproduct, the permanent residue of countless individual acts of faith and devotion. In this light, the lines were not meant to be seen by anyone, God or human. They were meant to be done. The value was in the journey of making them and the ritual of using them, a continuous cycle of creation and worship that kept their world in balance. So, were the lines a message for the gods, or was the making of the lines itself the message? Perhaps the desert holds one final, startling clue that could tip the scales. Just a short distance north of the Nazca Plateau, the story of the desert lines takes a profound and revealing turn. Here, etched into the rugged hillsides overlooking the Palpa valleys, lies an older and perhaps more intimate chapter of this mystery. These are the Palpa Lines, the work of the Paracas culture, a people who thrived for centuries before the Nazca ever laid a stone. The difference in their art speaks volumes. While the Nazca spread their designs across a flat, unbroken desert canvas, the Paracas chose a dramatic, vertical stage. Their most famous figures, like the intricate family group or the majestic Lapata figure, are not hidden on the plain but are boldly displayed on the slopes of hills. This single choice changes everything. These geoglyphs were created to be seen, A person standing in the valley below could look up and witness the entire form of a deity or a giant humanoid figure silhouetted against the sky. This was public art on a monumental scale, meant to inspire awe and reinforce shared beliefs for everyone in the community. The purpose seems more direct, more connected to the human gaze. The Paracas figures themselves are often human-like, with elaborate headdresses and what appear to be weapons, suggesting they represent powerful ancestors or gods watching over the people. The technique is also distinct. The Paracas created many of their lines by removing lighter stones to reveal a darker substrate beneath, a reverse image of the Nazca method that made their designs stand out even more starkly against the hillside. This shift in location and visibility is a crucial clue. It suggests that the earliest desert artists were creating symbols for a terrestrial audience. Their art was part of the lived landscape, a constant, visible reminder of their cosmology. So what happened? Why did the later Nazca culture abandon these visible hillside canvases for the immense, hidden plains? The evolution from the Palpa to the Nazca Lines might trace a fascinating journey in spiritual belief. Perhaps for the Paracas, the gods were close, residing in the mountains that touched the sky. Their art was a way to bring those gods into view. For the Nazca, the divine may have retreated further away into the sky itself. Their art then became a grander, more abstract form of communication, a prayer so vast it could only be fully appreciated by the celestial beings it was meant for. The hidden nature of the Nazca Lines was not an accident, but the next step in a spiritual evolution, a deliberate turning away from the human audience toward a divine one. This progression challenges the idea that the Nazca needed alien help. It shows a clear, logical development of an idea over time. A culture does not suddenly start creating perfect, invisible geoglyphs. They refine a tradition, pushing it to its ultimate, breathtaking conclusion. The sprawling desert lines find their spiritual anchor at a place called Kehuachi. Rising from the dusty plain, this was not a city of bustling markets or crowded homes, but a vast ceremonial center, the religious capital of the Nazca world. For centuries, this was the destination. Pilgrims would have traveled from distant valleys, their journeys culminating here among the grand pyramids and temples built from sun-dried adobe. Kehuachi was the beating heart of Nazca spirituality, and the lines stretching across the Pampa were its arteries. This powerful connection transforms our understanding of the geoglyphs. They were not isolated artworks, but integral parts of a living, breathing ritual landscape. The long, straight lines radiating from the plateau can be seen as sacred roads, physical pathways guiding pilgrims toward the holy city. Walking one of these lines was not just a trance-inducing practice, it was a literal journey to a sacred source. The very act of traversing the desert, step by deliberate step, was a form of purification, preparing the traveler for the powerful ceremonies that awaited them at Kehuachi. The massive trapezoids, those open-sided shapes that resemble giant plazas, take on a new role here. Archaeologists suggest these could have been gathering spaces for large groups of people before they made the final leg of their pilgrimage into the city itself. Imagine thousands of people congregating in one of these immense clearings, a temporary city of the faithful camped on the desert floor, all oriented toward the spiritual power emanating from Kehuachi's temples. This theory weaves the lines and the city into a single, unified whole. The geoglyphs were the approach, the grand entranceway to a holy site. The rituals performed on the lines, the processions, the offerings, the celestial observations were all precursors to the main events held within the city's walls. The entire region becomes a stage for a recurring religious drama, a cycle of festivals and pilgrimages that define the Nazca calendar and bound their society together. The animal figures, like the spider and the monkey, could have served as clan totems or spiritual guardians for different groups of pilgrims, each group identifying with a specific geoglyph as their starting point on the sacred map. This was a cosmology written in stone and soil, a testament to a society whose entire world was interlaced with the sacred. If Kehuachi was the heart of this world, then the lines were the pathways of its faith, connecting the people to their gods and to each other in a web of devotion visible only from the heavens. Her name became as inseparable from the desert as the lines themselves. Maria Reich arrived in Peru as a young mathematician in the 1930s, but it was her collaboration with Paul Kaysak that ignited a lifelong obsession. After he returned to the United States, Reich stayed, moving into a small, rudimentary house near the Pampa. With little more than a ladder, a broom, and a profound sense of purpose, she began a solitary mission that would define the next half-century of her life. She understood that the true enemy of the lines was not time, but modern intrusion. Trucks and cars driving across the fragile desert crust could erase in moments what had survived for 2,000 years. So she took it upon herself to be their guardian, patrolling the vast expanse on foot and confronting anyone who threatened the ancient markings. She swept the lines meticulously with her broom, clearing them of dust and debris to keep their edges sharp and visible. Her most vital work, however, was measurement. Using nothing more than a tape measure, a compass, and her mathematical mind, she single-handedly mapped and documented hundreds of the geoglyphs. She was convinced the lines were a sophisticated astronomical calendar, a theory she developed and defended with fierce determination. Her book, The Mystery on the Desert, laid out her life's work, arguing that the figures and lines mapped out celestial cycles and constellations. She saw the spider not just as an animal, but as a representation of the Orion constellation, and the monkey's spiral tail as a model of a swirling galaxy. Over the decades, she fought off government plans for irrigation projects and agricultural development that would have plowed straight through the ancient art. She used her own modest funds to hire guards and eventually convinced the Peruvian government to officially recognize and protect the site. The local people, who initially viewed this tall, sun-bleached foreigner with suspicion, grew to respect her unwavering dedication, affectionately calling her the Lady of the Lines. Maria Reich went blind and frail in her old age, but her spirit never left the desert. She had given her entire life to a mystery, not for fame, but from a deep, abiding conviction that the world was about to lose something priceless. Because of her, the lines were saved for future generations to ponder. Her story forces us to ask a difficult question: would these ancient wonders even exist for us to debate today without the fierce, solitary love of one remarkable woman? Maria Reich's worst fears have become a daily reality. The very fascination that saved the Nazca Lines now threatens to erase them. A single misstep, one tire track driven across the fragile desert crust, can scar a 2,000-year-old design permanently. The dark stones, once carefully piled by ancient hands, are scattered by modern tires. The sharp, clean lines that have defied centuries of wind are now blurred by the treads of off-road vehicles, whose drivers sometimes veer off designated paths for a closer, more destructive look. This is not an act of malice, but often one of ignorance, a failure to understand that this entire landscape is a single, irreplaceable artifact. The fragility of this desert canvas was shockingly demonstrated in 2014. A group of activists from the organization Greenpeace staged a protest near the famous hummingbird geoglyph. They laid down large, bright yellow cloth letters reading "Time for Change" on the desert floor directly adjacent to the ancient figure. In their mission to draw global attention to climate change, they inadvertently caused significant damage. Their footprints and the weight of their materials compacted the soil and disturbed the precise arrangement of stones, leaving scars in an area of immense archaeological sensitivity. The incident caused international outrage and highlighted a painful irony that even those with a message of preservation could become agents of destruction. Beyond human error, a slower, more insidious threat is advancing. Climate change is altering the very environment that has preserved the lines for millennia. While the Nazca Desert remains dry, scientists are observing an increase in rare but violent weather events. Sudden, heavy downpours, once almost unheard of, now occasionally lash the plateau. These torrential rains create flash floods that gouge gullies directly through the geoglyphs, washing away the delicate stones in minutes. Stronger, more erratic winds then scatter the debris, further eroding the crisp edges of the figures. The perfect preservative that was the desert's stable climate is becoming increasingly unstable. The final challenge is one of balance. Tourism provides the vital funds and global interest needed for conservation, yet every visitor brings a tiny, cumulative risk. The dust stirred by tourist planes and the pressure from thousands of footsteps on designated viewing towers create a constant need for monitoring and repair. Scientific study is essential to understanding the lines, but even archaeologists must tread with extreme care, knowing their own excavations could disturb the context of the site. We are left with a profound dilemma. How do we protect a wonder meant for the sky from the very world that finally learned to see it? The survival of these lines now depends on a fragile pact between curiosity and respect, a promise to look without touching, to marvel without leaving a mark. The desert floor has kept its secrets for 2,000 years, but it is finally meeting its match. Our perspective is no longer limited to the view from a small plane's window. Today, a technological revolution is unfolding above the Nazca Plateau, led by silent, orbiting satellites and buzzing drones. These new eyes in the sky are peeling back layers of history, revealing a hidden world of geoglyphs that earlier researchers like Maria Reich could never have seen. From hundreds of miles in space, high-resolution satellites capture the entire desert canvas in stunning detail. Their cameras can detect subtle variations in soil composition and vegetation growth, revealing the faint, ghostly outlines of figures that have been erased by time and are invisible to the naked eye. This is how archaeologists recently discovered more than 140 new geoglyphs etched into the landscape. Many of these newly found designs are fundamentally different from the famous animal shapes. They depict humanoid figures, often in dynamic poses, some holding what appear to be weapons or staffs. Others show complex scenes like a pair of warriors facing each other, their forms stretching over 100 feet across the desert. These discoveries reveal a narrative quality to the lines that we never knew existed, suggesting they might tell stories of myth, conflict, or powerful ancestors. But the satellites provide the wide view, the grand map. To see the intricate details, researchers send in the drones. These nimble machines fly just meters above the ground, their high-definition cameras capturing the texture of every stone. They can hover over a single line, documenting the precise way the rocks were piled, revealing construction techniques that are impossible to discern from higher altitudes. Drones can create intricate three-dimensional models of the geoglyphs, allowing archaeologists to study the lines from every angle, to measure the depth of the trenches, and to understand how they interact with the subtle contours of the land. This is where artificial intelligence enters the story. The sheer volume of data from satellites and drones is immense, far too much for any human team to analyze completely. So scientists are training AI algorithms to scan the imagery, searching for patterns that might escape the human eye. The AI is learning to recognize the unique signature of a man-made geoglyph, distinguishing it from a natural geological formation or modern tire track. It can identify faint, straight lines that hint at a larger, unfinished design, or spot a cluster of small, previously overlooked figures that form a larger, cohesive scene. This technological trinity is rewriting the history of the Nazca. The new, smaller geoglyphs appear to be older, dating back to the Paracas and early Nazca periods. This suggests the tradition began not with the colossal spider and monkey, but with more human-centric symbols. The evolution seems clear, starting with visible hillside figures, moving to smaller, more numerous ground drawings, and culminating in the monumental masterpieces we know today. The mystery is no longer static. Every flight of a drone, every satellite pass, adds another piece to a puzzle we are only beginning to assemble. What other stories are waiting just beneath the surface of the stones for the right technology to give them a voice? The alien theory offers a thrilling story, but it crumbles under the weight of simple facts. The most significant flaw is the claim that the lines are only visible from the air. This is simply not true. While the full, breathtaking panorama of a hummingbird requires altitude, many of the geoglyphs are perfectly visible from the surrounding foothills and low ridges that border the desert plateau. A person standing on these natural vantage points could have easily supervised the construction, directing teams below to ensure the lines remained straight and the curves were true. The creators did not need alien overseers and flying saucers, they just needed a nearby hill to climb. Furthermore, the idea that these were landing strips for spacecraft defies basic engineering. The desert surface is not a solid tarmac, it is composed of loose soil, sand, and small stones. The weight of any advanced landing vehicle would have sunk into this fragile ground, churning it into dust and obliterating the very lines it was meant to use. Why would interstellar travelers need landing instructions scratched into dirt that could not support their ships? The complete absence of any physical evidence is another fatal blow to the ancient astronaut idea. If this plateau was a bustling spaceport, where are the artifacts? Where is the scorched earth from powerful engines, the fragments of unfamiliar metal, or any trace of technology beyond the Nazca's known capabilities? Not a single piece of such evidence has ever been found. Every object unearthed at sites like Cahuachi is unequivocally of human, earthly origin. The most powerful argument against the alien theory, however, is the one we have already seen demonstrated. The Nazca people possessed all the skill, motivation, and simple technology required. We know they used basic surveying tools like ropes and stakes. We have seen their capacity for massive, coordinated communal projects in their subterranean aqueducts. Their profound spiritual beliefs, tied to water and the heavens, provide a more than sufficient reason for such a monumental undertaking. The ancient astronaut hypothesis, while captivating, ultimately does a disservice to the Nazca. It strips a sophisticated and ingenious culture of its greatest achievement, handing the credit for their faith and their labor to fictional space travelers. The real wonder is not that aliens might have done it, but that humans certainly did. So why does this idea of ancient astronauts remain so stubbornly popular in our modern imagination? The mystery of the desert took a bizarre and personal turn with a discovery that seemed to leap from the pages of science fiction. In 2017, a journalist named James Mawson presented a collection of small, mummified bodies allegedly found in a tomb near the Nazca Lines. These were not typical human remains. They were tiny, with smooth, grayish skin, elongated heads, and most strikingly, hands and feet bearing only 3 long digits. The claims made were extraordinary, that these were the preserved bodies of non-human entities, perhaps even the ancient astronauts themselves. For those who already believed the lines were an alien creation, this was the ultimate proof, the physical evidence that had always been missing. The narrative was irresistible, a perfect fusion of desert art and biological mystery, yet the scientific community reacted with immediate and profound skepticism. Forensic experts and archaeologists pointed to glaring red flags. The proportions of the bodies seemed anatomically improbable, with the 3-fingered hands lacking the complex musculature needed for a functioning grip. The alleged fusion of vertebrae in the neck was cited as evidence of an otherworldly biology, but critics argued it was more consistent with known human pathologies or even deliberate cranial deformation, a practice well documented in ancient Andean cultures. The fierce debate that erupted was less about the evidence and more about its source. The mummies were not uncovered in a controlled archaeological dig by accredited institutions, but were presented by a figure with a history of promoting controversial paranormal claims. This lack of a verifiable chain of custody left a cloud of doubt over the entire affair. Were these clever hoaxes, perhaps cobbled together from ancient human and animal bones? Or were they genuine archaeological finds that had been misinterpreted and sensationalized? This controversial twist demonstrates a powerful human desire to find a tangible answer, to hold proof in our hands. It reveals how a deep-seated mystery can create a vacuum, one that compelling stories, regardless of their factual footing, are always eager to fill. The desert holds more than just lines, it holds the echoes of ceremonies long past. While the full scale of the geoglyphs is invisible from the ground, the evidence of their use is buried right at our feet. Archaeologists have unearthed a compelling trail of physical clues that transform the abstract theories into tangible history. At the endpoints of certain lines, and at the crucial intersections where multiple paths meet, excavations have revealed small, deliberate deposits. These are not random collections of debris, but carefully placed offerings. Fragments of beautiful, polychrome pottery have been found, vessels that once likely held chicha, a fermented corn beer, or other ritual drinks. There are spondylus shells imported at great cost from the distant warm waters of Ecuador. To the Nazca, these vibrant orange shells were not just jewelry, they were sacred objects, potent symbols of water and fertility because they came from the ocean itself. The presence of these items points to specific, repeated ceremonies. A procession would walk a line, carrying these precious objects, and at its terminus, they would deliberately break the pottery and leave the shells as a gift. This was a direct transaction with the divine, a physical plea for the very water and life the shells represented. Even more telling are the human remains. At several key locations, archaeologists have discovered burials. These are not grand tombs for kings, but simpler interments, often of individuals placed in a seated, fetal position. They were buried with small, personal grave goods, simple pots or tools, suggesting they were not rulers, but perhaps revered community elders or ritual specialists. These burials at the endpoints of lines powerfully connect the geoglyphs to ancestor veneration. In many ancient Andean cultures, ancestors were not gone, they were active spiritual forces who could intercede with the gods on behalf of the living. Burying a respected ancestor at the point where a sacred pathway ended may have been a way to permanently station a guardian there, a spiritual sentry who would eternally watch over the ritual and carry its messages directly to the other world. This transforms the lines from simple drawings into a dynamic ritual landscape. A long, straight line becomes a processional route walked by chanting priests. A trapezoid becomes a gathering space for a community sharing a ritual meal before an offering. An intersection becomes a powerful spiritual crossroads marked by the grave of an ancestor who ensures the prayers sent from that spot are heard. This is the human scale of the mystery, found not in the skies, but in the broken pottery, the foreign shells, and the silent bones that whisper of a people trying to touch the heavens from the desert floor. Perhaps no single geoglyph weaves the threads of earth and sky together more perfectly than the spider. At first glance, it is a masterful depiction of an arachnid, 150 feet across, its body and legs rendered with clean, confident lines. But a closer look reveals a biological anomaly, a detail so precise it could not have been a simple artist's whim. Most spiders have 8 legs, and this one does too, but one of those legs is dramatically elongated, ending in an unusually shaped tip. For decades, this oddity was just another part of the mystery until researchers made a stunning connection. This is not a generic garden spider. Its specific anatomy, particularly that extended leg and its segmented, claw-like end, points to a very real and incredibly rare creature known as the ricinule. This is a nocturnal hunter that lives in the deepest, darkest crevices of the Amazon rainforest, a spider so obscure that even today it is seldom seen by human eyes. The question is immediate and profound. How, and more importantly, why, would the Nazca people depict a spider that most of them would never have encountered in their dry, coastal desert? The answer may be written in the stars. That one uniquely elongated leg does not just point randomly into the desert. When researchers like Phyllis Petluga of the Adler Planetarium mapped the spider onto the night sky, they found that this specific leg aligns directly with the constellation we know as Orion. In Nazca cosmology, this constellation was not a hunter, but likely held a different, deeply significant meaning, perhaps associated with rain or the cyclical nature of time. This single geoglyph becomes a breathtaking fusion of symbols. It ties a rare, earth-bound creature to a specific, powerful celestial pattern. The ricinule spider, living in the wet, hidden world of the rainforest, was a perfect emblem for the life-giving moisture the Nazca desperately prayed for. By connecting its form to Orion in the heavens, they were creating a permanent, physical link between the source of water on Earth and the divine clockwork in the sky. This was more than art or astronomy, it was a permanent prayer, a celestial map, and a biological petition etched into the very fabric of their world. The spider does not ask us to choose between the water cult theory and the astronomical observatory idea. It insists that they are one and the same, a unified language of faith written in lines of stone. These long, straight lines are not random scratches on the landscape. They are deliberate, targeted pathways. Many of the most significant lines stretch for miles across the flat desert floor, and if you were to follow them with unwavering dedication, they would lead you directly to a specific point on the distant horizon. Archaeologists have meticulously mapped these trajectories and discovered a remarkable pattern. A striking number of these lines point unerringly toward pockets of water in the far-off Andes Mountains. They aim at places where streams emerge from the foothills, at small, fertile valleys, or at natural springs. In a world defined by aridity, these water sources were not just practical resources, they were sacred manifestations of divine favor. A line pointing toward such a place was not just a direction, it was a spiritual vector, a constant physical prayer aimed at the source of all life. This gives profound meaning to the idea of the lines as pilgrimage routes. A journey along one of these paths was a symbolic walk toward the very essence of survival. Each step taken by a shaman or a group of pilgrims was a reenactment of their people's deepest yearning, moving from the realm of dryness toward the promise of water. But the connection goes even deeper than geography. These lines also align with huacas, the sacred places that dotted the Andean world. A huaca could be a distinctive mountain peak, a large, unusual boulder, or a cave believed to be an entrance to the underworld. The Nazca people saw the entire landscape as alive with spiritual energy, and these huacas were nodes of concentrated power. A straight line connecting the ceremonial center of Cahuachi to a distant, powerful huaca created a channel for that energy to flow. It was a way of tethering their community to the sacred geography of their world, weaving their existence into a cosmic web. The physical act of walking the line was a way of activating this connection, of drawing power from the mountain or the sacred stone back toward the people. So a single line can be read in multiple, overlapping ways. It is a map to a water source, a pilgrimage route to a holy place, and a spiritual cable conducting divine energy. The precision of these lines, then, was not an obsession with geometry for its own sake. It was an act of desperate necessity and profound faith. To be even slightly off course would mean the prayer was misdirected, the connection broken. In a land where life hung on the arrival of water, there was no room for error, even in their pleas to the gods. The monkey's coiled tail spirals into a perfect geometric form, a shape that stands out even among the other strange and wonderful figures. This is no simple curve. Its tight, circular pattern is deliberate, a complex design etched with the same precision as the animal's long limbs and distinct head. For a culture that wove celestial patterns into the very fabric of their desert art, this spiral was likely far more than an artistic flourish. Many researchers believe this looping tail points our eyes upward to a specific and brilliant cluster of stars known as the Pleiades. In the clear night skies of the Nazca Desert, this small, tight grouping of stars would have been a familiar and deeply significant beacon. Across many Andean cultures, the Pleiades was not just a random collection of lights, it was a divine clock in the heavens. Its annual disappearance and reappearance marked the most critical moments of the agricultural year. When the cluster vanished below the western horizon, it signaled the end of the old cycle, a time to prepare the earth. Its triumphant return in the eastern sky before dawn heralded the coming of the rains and the beginning of the planting season. This celestial event was a matter of life and death, dictating when to sow seeds to ensure a harvest that would sustain the community. By linking the monkey to the Pleiades, the Nazca were creating a permanent, earthly anchor for a celestial power. The monkey itself, an animal native to the lush, rain-drenched Amazon forests to the east, was a living symbol of the water and fertility they so desperately needed. Its spiraling tail, then, becomes a stunningly elegant symbol. It connects the life-giving essence of the monkey, a creature from a watery world, directly to the celestial mechanism that governed the arrival of that very water. This single geoglyph fuses earth and sky, biology and astronomy into one coherent statement of faith. It was a prayer for fertile growth, timed by the stars and symbolized by an animal of the rainforest, all captured in a single monumental drawing. The spiral was their way of saying they understood the connection, that they saw the universe as an interconnected whole, and that they were aligning their fate with its cycles. Perhaps the greatest mistake we can make is to choose just one theory. The human spirit is not so simple, and neither was the world of the Nazca. Their reality was not divided into neat categories of science, religion, and art. For them, these concepts were a single, unified whole. The true power of the lines emerges not from any single explanation, but from the beautiful, intricate way they weave all these purposes together into a complex spiritual landscape. Water, astronomy, and sacred journey were not competing ideas. They were different notes in the same harmonious song. A single straight line could function in multiple dimensions at once. On a practical level, it pointed toward a distant mountain stream, a source of literal, physical water. For an astronomer priest, that same line might align with the sunrise on the solstice, marking a sacred date on the celestial calendar. And for a shaman walking its path, it was a conduit for spiritual travel, a way to enter a trance and communicate with the ancestors who controlled the rain. The geoglyphs were a grand, multi-layered language. The spider is the perfect symbol of this synthesis. It is a biological representation of a rare, rainforest creature, a clear symbol for the water they needed. Its uniquely elongated leg points precisely to the constellation of Orion, linking it to the heavens, and its very form, etched into the desert, provided a sacred pathway for a spiritual practitioner to walk, to connect with the essence of that creature. This was not an either-or proposition. The water cult required precise astronomical knowledge to know when to perform the rituals. The astronomical observations were given meaning and power through the shamanic rituals performed on the lines. The shamanic journeys were often focused on the ultimate goal of bringing water and fertility to the people. They fed into each other, creating a self-reinforcing system of belief and practice that sustained their culture for centuries. This also explains why the lines evolved over time. The earlier, visible figures on the Palpa hillsides may have been more focused on ancestor veneration and community identity. As their society grew and their understanding of the cosmos deepened, their spiritual technology evolved with it. They moved onto the vast plains, creating a much larger, more complex system of symbols that integrated their growing knowledge of astronomy with their enduring, desperate need for water. The Nazca did not see a division between praying for rain and tracking the stars, because to them, the stars govern the rain. They did not separate the act of walking from the act of praying, because the walk itself was the prayer. The lines were the physical manifestation of this complete, interconnected worldview. They were a vast, interactive spiritual machine where every element worked in concert to maintain the balance of their world. So the question is not which theory is correct, but how we can learn to see the world as they did, where every path leads to the divine. That thin line between ancient faith and modern mystery is precisely why these desert drawings refuse to release us. The Nazca Lines have transcended their origins to become a cultural mirror, reflecting our own deepest questions back at us. We are a species hardwired for meaning, forever trying to read the story of our own past. When we look at these immense geoglyphs, we are not just seeing lines in the sand, we are seeing a Rorschach test for the human soul. For some, they are proof of a lost, advanced wisdom, a testament to human ingenuity that rivals our own. For others, they are a blank screen onto which we project our hopes and fears about extraterrestrial life and our own cosmic insignificance. This is the core of their enduring power. They represent a conversation that spans 2,000 years, a dialogue between an ancient people who etched their prayers into the earth and a modern world that scrambles to decode them. In an age of satellites and artificial intelligence, we still cannot definitively answer why they were made. This humble fact is a profound antidote to our own technological arrogance. It reminds us that some mysteries are not puzzles to be solved, but wonders to be contemplated. The lines force us to confront the fundamental human drive to connect with something greater than ourselves, whether we call it the gods, the cosmos, or the unknown. They stand as a permanent monument to the universal language of awe, a language that we are still learning to speak. The desert holds its secrets close, but the clues it has offered point toward a deeply human story of faith and ingenuity. We have walked the path of the water cult, where lines were desperate prayers for life-giving rain etched into the earth. We have traced the astronomical theory, seeing the plateau as a colossal calendar aligning with solstices and the Pleiades. We have followed the spiritual pathway, where walking the lines was a ritual journey into trance and communion with the ancestors, and we have confronted the extraterrestrial hypothesis, a captivating story of ancient astronauts that ultimately strips the Nazca of their own profound achievement. The truth is likely not a single, simple answer, but a beautiful synthesis. The Nazca world was not divided into science, religion, and art. These were one and the same. Their precise astronomy gave their water rituals their sacred timing. Their shamanic journeys were fueled by the desperate need for fertility. Their monumental art was the physical expression of this complete, interconnected worldview. They were not primitive people waiting for alien saviors. They were a sophisticated culture that used simple tools and immense communal effort to build a bridge between their earthly struggles and the cosmic order they revered. So the final, lingering question is not just about them, but about us. Does the mystery of the Nazca Lines show us a people looking to the stars for their gods, or does our own enduring fascination with alien origins reveal that we are the ones still gazing at the heavens, searching for answers, and perhaps for company in the vast, silent cosmos? What do you believe these ancient lines are truly saying? Share your own theory in the comments below and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest mysteries our world has to offer.